Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here this afternoon for this press conference to present the preliminary statement of findings and conclusions from the international observers for yesterday's parliamentary elections here in Armenia. Presenting the statement today will be Farah Karimi, who is the Special Coordinator and leader of the OSCE Short-Term Observation Mission, Ms. Editia Estrella, who is the Deputy Head of the PACE Delegation, Yevrosima Pejovic, the Head of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Delegation, Nathalie Loiseau, the Head of the European Union Delegation, and Yanis Lenarčić, who is the Head of the Election Observation Mission from the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. Now, we will have an opportunity this afternoon for questions from the media, but before we move along to that, please, Ms. Karimi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear representatives of the media, welcome and thank you all for attending our press conference. As mentioned, my name is Farah Karimi and I am a senator from the Netherlands. I serve as the head of the Dutch delegation to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and I also chair its ad hoc committee on migration. I am addressing you today in my capacity as special coordinator and leader of the OSCE Short-Term Observers Mission to the 2026 parliamentary elections in Armenia. I would like to warmly thank my colleagues, Yanis Lenarčić, leading the OSCE ODIHR mission in Armenia, Editia Estrella and Damien Cotier from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Nathalie Loiseau, who headed the delegation of the European Parliament, and last not but least, my dear colleague Yevrosima Pejovic, heading the delegation of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, for a constructive and fruitful cooperation during this mission. Our international election observation mission was truly a joint effort and comprehensive undertaking. The high number of international observers present on occasion of these elections testifies to the strong support of the international community to Armenian people. Indeed, our joint mission was composed of 457 observers from 42 countries deployed throughout the country on election day, including 322 OSCE ODIHR observers and experts, 93 parliamentary observers from the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and 27 from the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, and 15 from European Parliament. I would like to thank everyone who was present on the ground observing these important elections, both yesterday, but also those who have been conducting a long-term and qualitative monitoring for several months. Our joint report on the elections is based on our observers' election day assessments combined together, as well as on the long-term and qualitative monitoring performed by the ODIHR. We will now present to you the main conclusions and findings of our joint international election observation mission. Our complete statement will be available to you all shortly. The 7 June 2026 parliamentary elections offered voters a genuine choice among political alternatives in a well-run process. Direct pressure from abroad in the form of escalating trade restrictions and security threats during the campaign aimed at unduly influencing voters in favor of opposition forces was observed. The campaign was highly confrontational with divisive rhetoric and marked by allegations of vote buying and other electoral violations that led to numerous criminal proceedings of opposition candidates and activists, resulting in many opposition supporters refraining from actively engaging in the campaign. This, along with pressure on public sector employees to attend ruling party events and recently introduced social and economic measures, raised concerns about the equality of opportunity to campaign. The legal framework provides a sound basis for democratic elections, and the election administration enjoyed stakeholders' trust. Insufficient oversight and regulation of campaign finances limited transparency and opportunity for public scrutiny. Voters' access to impartial and reliable information was negatively impacted by the polarized media environment, biased media coverage, and a divisive online campaign with the use of manipulative content. Election day proceedings were assessed overwhelmingly positively in the vast majority of polling stations observed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the overall picture. Our more detailed assessment may be found in our statement of preliminary findings and conclusions. As a special coordinator and leader of all OSCE short-term observers, I would like to commend the diligent work of our observers yesterday in polling stations throughout the country. The elections took place at a particularly pivotal moment in Armenia's development, as the country continues to navigate a complex democratic and geopolitical environment. I commend the Armenian voters for their strong commitment to democracy and engagement. It should also be noted that the election authorities managed the technical preparations professionally and efficiently. This also applied on election day, as our observers assessed the proceedings positively in the vast majority of the 1,403 polling stations visited out of the total 2,005 polling stations of the country, and this is really a very remarkable number. Let me take a moment to applaud the women and men of this country who administered the elections in polling stations yesterday and contributed to carrying out the country's democratic effort. Very well done. Especially against a backdrop of polarized political environment, regional security concerns, and broader geopolitical pressure, these elections served as an important test of the robustness of Armenia's democracy. The concentration of arrests and criminal prosecutions against opposition figures contributed to perceptions of selective justice, while a polarized media landscape, inflammatory rhetoric, misinformation, and persistent foreign pressure and interference challenged Armenia's democratic resilience and the integrity of public debate. This underscores the importance of continued efforts to strengthen democratic institutions, safeguard fundamental freedoms, and foster public trust in democratic processes. In light of this, I would like to emphasize our role as election observers and the value of our findings. Our task is not to decide Armenia's future or to make judgment on behalf of its citizens. Rather, our role is to provide an independent and impartial assessment of the electoral process, highlighting both positive developments and areas where improvements may be needed. We hope that our recommendations will prove useful and valuable to the Armenian people, institutions, and political actors as they reflect on these elections and consider the steps to further strengthen democratic processes in the country. I would like to thank the authorities of Armenia and the numerous stakeholders we have met and exchanged with for their cooperation and insights during this mission. I would like also to share my heartfelt gratitude to the people of this country who offered a very warm welcome to our observers on election day. Now, I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues and partners so they may also share their assessments and impressions with you. Thank you all for your attention.
And thank you, Ms. Karimi. Now, please, Ms. Estrella.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Edith Estrella, and I have the honor and pleasure to replace for this press conference my Swiss colleague and friend, Mr. Damien Cotier, who has led the election observation delegation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I myself am from Portugal, and I have to start on a personal note by saying how much grateful I am towards the Armenian people for their wonderful hospitality. May I thank all my colleagues here for the smooth and fruitful collaboration that we had in the framework of our international election observation mission. The joint statement that has just been introduced is the result of our common efforts. As you probably know, Armenia is under the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe monitoring procedure and has therefore committed to invite us to observe elections. Our delegation had 22 members, including the two co-rapporteurs of the PACE Monitoring Committee. All of these members, 22 members, representing all the political groups and coming from 11 different member states of the Council of Europe. As always, we were accompanied by two representatives of the Venice Commission who provided us valuable legal advice. We were assisted by staff from the Division on Election Observation and from the Committee on Legal Affairs. Thank you very much. As already mentioned, the PACE delegation fully supports the joint statement of our International Election Observation Mission. I would like now only stress the following. The elections took place in a particularly tense geopolitical context with direct foreign interference. It is clear that it has been a priority for Russia to use all means to keep Armenia within its sphere of influence. To achieve this aim, Russian authorities relied on their vast experience in interfering in elections. Pressure and threats from Moscow reached an unprecedented and worrying level. We even heard Mr. Putin referring to a possible Ukrainian scenario should Armenia continue on its pro-European path. In this context, I want to emphasize the excellent work of the election administration. I myself had a very positive experience yesterday while visiting a number of polling stations in and around Yerevan. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you, Ms. Estrella. And now, Ms. Pejovic.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Yerevan and I'm a member of the Parliament of Montenegro and Vice Chair of OSCE PA Committee on Political Affairs and Security. It was an honor for me to lead our observer delegation here in Armenia. Let me also, on behalf of our all observers, thank the authorities of Armenia, our dear colleagues led by Janez Lenarčić, and our partners from the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe and the European Parliament for the excellent cooperation throughout this mission. Our delegation consists of 93 observers from 29 OSCE participating states. Over the past days and during the weeks leading up to Election Day, we met with a broad range of interlocutors from across the political spectrum, institutions, civil societies and medias, and yesterday our observers assessed voting and counting throughout the country. I would like to express our sincere appreciation for the warm welcome we received, not only here in Yerevan, but throughout the country. Our PA observers were deployed across Yerevan and 9 provinces of Armenia: Aragazotn, Armavir, Ararat, Kotaik, Gerarkuchuk, Vayodtsor, Lori, Tavush, and Shirak. Everywhere we went, we were received with openness, professionalism, and hospitality. That willingness to engage with international observers is itself an important sign of confidence in democratic processes. Against this backdrop, it is important to note that the importance of those elections, combined with the polarizing rhetoric throughout the campaign, created a tense atmosphere for both voters and election officials. Election bodies operated under heightened scrutiny, while voters were exposed to sustained political pressure and intense political debate. Tensions arising from domestic and external factors added to the pressure surrounding those elections and influenced public perception of the quality of election administration, highlighting the importance of promoting a constructive political climate and strengthening public confidence in electoral bodies. Coming from Montenegro myself, I'm conscious that small countries often face similar challenges and in many ways share a common destiny. We know that domestic institutions are not threatened overnight, or democratic institutions are not threatened overnight. They are strengthened through resilience, through public trust, through constructive criticism, and through a willingness to continue improving. This is where the international community can play a valuable role. Election observation is not about judging countries or lecturing them. It's about accompanying them, supporting democratic development, sharing experiences, and helping society build confidence in their institutions, including through a constructive and objective assessment. It is equally about recognizing process and encountering countries to take pride in their democratic resilience. It is in this spirit that our findings and recommendations should be understood, as a contribution to Armenians' continued democratic development and to strengthening public confidence in democratic institutions. Finally, I would like to thank all election officials, citizen observers, party representatives, civil society organizations, media professionals, and above all, the voters of Armenia who contribute to this electoral process. I wish elected colleagues good luck and look forward to our cooperation in the future. Merci.
And thank you, Ms. Pejovic. And Ms. Lozo.
Thank you, Tom. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nathalie Loiseau. I am the head of the delegation of the European Parliament. I'm honored to address you on behalf of the European Parliament's election observation delegation. Our delegation is composed of 6 members from 4 political groups and 4 member states. I would like to warmly thank the Armenian authorities for inviting us, elected representatives of the European Union citizens, to observe these crucial elections. Our presence is a strong sign of support from the European Parliament to the democratic resilience of Armenia. Our delegation is part of the OSCE ODIHR International Election Observation Mission. Before I give you our impressions on yesterday's vote and the overall circumstances in which these parliamentary elections took place, I would like to thank Ambassador Janez Lenarčič, head of the ODIHR Election Observation Mission, Special Coordinator Farah Karimi, leader of the OSCE, Short-Term Observer Mission, Mrs. Adélie Estrela and Damien Coutier of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe delegation, and Mrs. Yevrosima Pejovic, head of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly delegation. And last but not least, the head of the EU delegation in Yerevan, dear Ambassador Vasilis Maragos. The European Parliament delegation fully subscribes to the statement of preliminary findings and conclusions of the International Election Observation Mission. Yesterday, we observed thousands of Armenian citizens going to vote enthusiastically and peacefully in an orderly and patient manner. The presence of so many first-time voters reminded me the emotion of exercising the voting rights for the first time. In many cases, the presence and the patience of elderly people, despite the long waiting time in queues, struck me even more. The electoral process was managed well and went smoothly. We met devoted polling stations members, a large majority of whom were women, who performed their duties with dedication and attention and a high level of professionalism. Still, on election day, some voters were lacking basic information about their polling stations and the voting procedures. The Armenian authorities should consider working on better voters' information in the future. However, we would like to acknowledge that in addition to the professional organization of the election day, the Central Electoral Commission acted impartially, namely in parties' registration and request of exclusions issues. On Sunday, our delegation observed the vote in Yerevan and surroundings and in Gyumri. The notably high turnout shows that Armenian citizens strongly believe in democracy. The electoral campaign was highly competitive, but also highly polarized, against the backdrop of a challenging international context. We regret the use of inflammatory rhetoric by prominent candidates. An unprecedented level of foreign malign interference attempting to derail the democratic process was observed through the use of different tools, including cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns. In addition, Russia exercised unprecedented pressure, using public threats and trade measures, trying to substantially alter the results of the elections. As members of the European Parliament, we strongly condemn this blatant interference in the domestic affairs of a sovereign state. On Armenian elections legal framework, we acknowledge the positive reforms to the electoral code and law on political parties, particularly regarding political finance transparency. However, we invite the authorities to complete the process. Further improvement in areas such as accountability and integrity of party and pre-campaign spending, third-party campaigning, and traceability of cash donations are needed. Let me say it clearly. Despite disinformation and pressure, Armenian citizens decided to exercise their rights and were able to do it freely. We have a message for all candidates. Democracy is not just about running for an election. It is also about accepting elections' final results when elections are held in a transparent and professional manner. Thank you very much for your attention. Merci.
And thank you, Ms. Loiseau. Now, Mr. Lenarčič, please.
Thank you. I wish to begin by thanking the people of Armenia for their warm welcome and hospitality. Our core team of experts and long-term observers have been in this country since late April. and we have observed all aspects of this election process in all its stages. And for election day, as it was already mentioned, we have been able to deploy, together with our parliamentary partners, a large number of observers, and that allowed us to get a comprehensive coverage of the election day proceedings. I wish to underline that our assessment that we shared with you is not based on individual impressions, but on a first-hand data systematically collected by our long-term and short-term observers, which is then aggregated and analyzed by our experts. Previous speakers have already covered a number of issues, but let me highlight some of them at the risk of repeating. The main point that I want to stress is that Armenia's voters were given and took the opportunity to make a genuine choice in a professionally managed election process and a vibrant and pluralistic, if often highly polarized, campaign. Unfortunately, they had to make that choice against a backdrop of unprecedented foreign interference and pressure in the form of punitive trade measures and day-by-day public threats of further negative consequences contingent on which choice they made. On legal framework, our assessment is that it provides a sound basis for democratic elections. And since the previous elections in 2021, we noted positive changes. However, several audit and civil and Venice Commission recommendations still remain unaddressed. Turning to election administration, we observed preparations at the central, territorial, and polling station levels over several weeks, with our observers attending most public sessions and trainings at various levels. Overall, we conclude that these elections were well organized and administered in a professional manner. The Central Election Commission and territorial election commissions were generally transparent and impartial in their work, with sessions open to us and other observers, and even broadcast online, and their decisions published. Turning to campaign, our 30 long-term observers attended more than 100 campaign events across this country and observed other traditional campaign activities. And we conclude, on the basis of their reports, that the campaign was vibrant and largely peaceful, both online and across the country. But this campaign was also highly polarized, highly confrontational, with repeated divisive and inflammatory rhetoric, including war-related messaging. On the other hand, we did not observe any systematic misuse of administrative resources at the local level. But our observers directly observed and received multiple allegations, some assessed as credible, of pressure and inducements on voters, including public employees, to attend campaign events, mainly by the ruling party. And together with recently introduced or initiated social and economic measures, this benefited the ruling party. Our long-term observers also received reports in Yerevan and most provinces describing an environment of fear from among supporters of the opposition. These reports concerned opposition activists allegedly being intimidated, investigated, or detained. This affected, in some areas, voters' readiness to take part in opposition-related activities. Social networks were a key source of campaign information. Our dedicated monitoring component followed several dozens of accounts across Facebook, Instagram, and Telegram. Just as the offline campaign, the online campaign was also confrontational and divisive, with personal attacks between candidates, as well as allegations of foreign links and conspiratorial narratives. We also observed the use of AI-generated, manipulative, and artificially amplified content by contestants to discredit opponents and by third parties, mainly aimed at discrediting the government and the very electoral process. Overall, the use of such intentionally misleading narratives and divisive rhetoric negatively affected the reliability of information available to voters. Turning to campaign finance, we noted continuing concerns about the link between money and politics. The rules and regulations have improved, but important gaps remain in both regulation and implementation. Among others, substantial pre-campaign spending remained outside reporting requirements. Third-party campaigning was not regulated, and the financial information of contestants was published by oversight institutions in a manner that limited public scrutiny before election day. In the media environment, our assessment is based on systematic media monitoring. Most monitored outlets amplified mutual accusations and divisive campaign rhetoric. There was little substantive analysis of contestants' platforms. The public broadcaster displayed clear bias in favor of the ruling party, and this is contrary to its public mandate. At the same time, some private outlets showed the opposite pattern, portraying the government negatively and favoring selected opposition contestants. And all this limited voters' ability to receive impartial and analytical information about the contestants. In conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Special Coordinator and heads of our partner parliamentary delegations. I had a great pleasure of working with their support and leadership. The order will remain in Armenia to follow the remaining stages of the electoral process and any election-related complaints and appeals. ODIHR will continue working with the national authorities after this process is concluded, including by publishing a final report, which will contain recommendations to improve the process for future elections. I would also like to thank the Armenian authorities for invitation and good cooperation with our mission. And finally, I would like to thank the team that I have worked with over the last 6 weeks for their expertise and support. In particular, I wish to thank our Armenian colleagues who made our work possible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lenarčič. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're now to the press conference, the press part of the press conference. So what I will ask you to do, please, is raise your hand if you do have a question. We'll have a microphone brought to you. Yep. And I'll ask you, please, before you ask your question, if you could just please give us your name and the media outlet you represent. So if we can. And with our forest of tripods, it might actually be easier for you to come to the front, if that helps, or at least stand, please. So do we have a microphone here?
Արփինե Թամրազյան 2 կցանկանայի հստակեցնեի կարտաքին միջամտություն ասելով ինչ նկատի ունեք, որ երկրների կամ որ կազմակերպությունների մասին է խոսքը Ռուսաստան, Եվրամիություն, ԱՄՆ, Ադրբեջան, Թուրքիա, այս ընթացքում մենք տարբեր հայտարարություն լսել ենք, դուք էլ խնդրեմ հստակեցրեք։ Շնորհակալություն։
Thank you. We speak in our report that you will be able to look at the end of this conference.
Can you just grab headphones?
I'm sorry, is it possible, could you grab, the thing is the translation is simultaneous, so there are headsets at the entrance to hear it that way.
I think that quite many people, they don't have it. So if you just can repeat the question before you start.
It's available in
I'm sorry. There are for those who'd like to get them and do it that way. There should, I believe, still be headsets for the translation, which is available in both English and Armenian. As far as because this is a system that's set up, we don't logistically have that set up to do here right now.
Okay. Can I proceed? Yes, in the report that you will be able to take a look at after this conference, we note on one hand foreign pressure and on the other foreign interference. These are two different things. Foreign pressure, under foreign pressure, we noted a series of trade restrictions imposed by the Russian Federation before and during the official campaign period in what we call an escalating manner. And these trade restrictions were, as we noted, accompanied by public statements by a number of officials from the Russian Federation threatening or menacing the future economic stability and security of Armenia in case of certain electoral result. On the other hand, we also noted a number of high-level visits and endorsements from the EU and US leaders. So this is what we meant under foreign pressure and foreign interference.
Okay, this time I have a microphone. My name is Rasmus Kampak. I'm from Swedish media Blankspot. Would you consider the election period free and fair?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I have been in this position, I think, several times in different countries, and this is the question that always comes up. Is it free or fair? We see, as I mentioned, our task as independent international observers actually to be very factual on what we see and also put it in comparison to the actual international standards that the countries themselves have signed to it. And that's actually what our report does at very different level. You know, all the different actually stages of a election process. And at the end, it is up to the people of the country to say what it was. Was it free? Was it fair? We actually present the information. We present the factual, actually, understanding of what was happening according to our observations, but the final judgment is up to the people of Armenia, and we know how actually just using free and fair is not going to be just to explain what we have seen. So that is actually my response to your question.
Ազատություն ռադիոկայան Անուշ Մկրտչյան, դուք ձեր Ազատություն ռադիոկայան Անուշ Մկրտչյան, դուք ձեր խոսքում ասացիք, որ քարոզարշավը եղել է խիստ բևեռացված եւ հակադրական, ուղեկցված բազմակի բաժանարար եւ սադրիչ ռետորաբանությամբ, այդ թվում պատերազմի թեմային առնչվող ուղերձներով։ Նաեւ նշեցիք, որ մյուս կողմից տեղական մակարդակում պետական վարչական ռեսուրսների համակարգային չարաշահման դեպքեր շատ չեք արձանագրել։ Այս ամենը հաշվի առնելով եւ ձեր նշած մնացած այսպես ասած թերություններն ու առավելություններն էլ հաշվի առնելով դուք կարող եք ասել, որ այս ամեն ինչը վերջնական արդյունք, վերջնական ազդեցություն չի թողել ընտրությունների վերջնական արդյունքի վրա։ Շնորհակալություն։
We observed no systematic use of administrative resources. Systematic, that's the difference. There were occasions where such things occurred, but they didn't have a systematic nature. As to the impact, that is something that it is not possible to measure just by observing, but we note that Armenian voters had a genuine choice and were able to make it in an environment that was free.
Maya Khachaturian, հանրային հեռուստաընկերություն, ԵԱՀԿ ԺՀՄ-ի գտարիների վերանցկացնում է դիտորդական առաքելություն Հայաստանում, այս ընտրությունները ինչով կառանձնացնեք եւ նշեցիք եւ դրական կողմեր եւ նաեւ խնդիրներ, այնուամենայնիվ մեր ընտրական գործընթացը համապատասխանում է արդյոք միջազգային չափանիշներին, ժողովրդավարական չափանիշներին։
In response to this question, it's difficult to add anything in addition to what was already said by all the speakers at this table. The critical issues, of course, were identified in our statements, and they are also enumerated in the report. But again, if it helps, we observed the ability of the Armenian voters to choose. There was a wide choice available. We at the same time observed direct pressure from abroad and foreign interference. And we also observed a large number of arrests and detentions that had an impact on the ability of certain individuals to participate in campaign. These are just some of the key features, but there are many others, and they are all assessed against OSCE commitments that Armenia has entered into, other international standards that are also valid for Armenia, as well as Armenian national legislation. Each and every aspect that was observed of this election process is assessed in our report against these standards.
And I would like to actually add something to that. I had also the pleasure and honor of observing the elections in 2021. Normally, and that's actually a matter of principle, we don't compare the elections with each other. And why? Why is that? This is because the context actually differs a lot. I mean, the context of 2021 was a different context than today's elections. And, this is something which makes it very difficult to say, to compare the elections with each other. Where we can make actually, or we can make sense of something like progress is, for example, at the level of legal developments. We look at there and we say, okay, we had this kind of recommendations. Did the country act upon those recommendations or didn't? But a general comparison between different elections is very difficult because the context in which actually the elections take place differs a lot. And that defines, of course, at the end also the way we look at the election process. And as Mr. Lenocic elaborated, what we do then is look at what is going on in the process and actually put it with the standards, with the international standards, and then give that back to the people of that country. So what we have seen, what we have observed.
Այսօր եմ լրատվական կայք Մանյա Պողոսյան։ Արդյոք ձեր պրակտիկայում եղել է նման դեպք կամ տեսել եք, երբ ընտրությունների ձայների հաշվարկի 10%-ի հիման վրա որևէ քաղաքական ուժ հայտարարում է իր հաղթանակի մասին, ինչպես դա երեկ եղավ մեր երկրում։ Շնորհակալություն։
That was premature, yes. And it was a bit risky because after the rest 90% of the votes would be counted, there was a high risk that the result would be different. So it was premature and risky. Thank you.
Շակի Ավոյան հրապարակ։ Դուք չեք ուզում համեմատել ընտրությունները, այդուամենայնիվ ես կխնդրեի համեմատեք ընտրությունները որևէ եվրոպական երկրի ընտրությունների հետ, հատկապես որ գիշերը, երբ տվյալները հաղորդում էին, մի քանի ժամ մենք ունեցանք այսպես մեծ պաուզա տվյալների հայտարարման Կենտրոնական ընտրական հանձնաժողովի կողմից, այն դեպքում, երբ համընդհանուր ընդդիմության ձայները եւ իշխանության ձայները շատ մոտ են իրար, շատ հավասար են եւ յուրաքանչյուր քվեն շատ կարեւոր է, արդյոք թափանցիկության առումով դուք խոցելի չեք համարում, որ նորմալ ընթացակարգով ձայները չէին հայտարարվում Կենտրոնական ընտրական հանձնաժողովի կողմից այն պայմաններում, երբ կար այդ հոգեբանական ճնշումը եւ իշխանությունները արդեն տոնում էին հաղթանակ 10%-ի վրա հիմնված։ Ձեզ համար տարօրինակ չէր, որ ձայների հաշվարկը այդպես ձգձգվեց եւ հետաձգվեց։
I'm happy to answer this question coming from the European Union and sharing what my colleagues and myself felt yesterday throughout the day and also throughout the night. First, throughout the day we were impressed by the turnout, the very broad turnout, young and old, men and women going to the polls, trusting the system, otherwise they wouldn't have done it. We were impressed by the professionalism of people in polling stations, how seriously, how precisely they behaved throughout the whole procedure, being during the vote or for the counting, where we were present. We were very impressed by the transparency of the whole process. And there are few, if any, EU member states which reached this level of transparency, and I'm bringing back some very good practices home to share them with my fellow citizens and with my authorities. On the fact that a prominent candidate claimed victory in the middle of the night, I'm not supporting this sort of behavior, but that's not the first time I see it, including in my country. And I was also struck by other comments by candidates from the opposition as well in the middle of the night. I'm not supporting it. I'm just saying this happens in the heat of a political campaign. And the good thing was that the CEC performed its duty professionally and that finally we had results in a very reasonable period of time. And now, after complaints will be examined, I hope that everybody will be able to accept the final results.
If I may to add a point, I mean, I think Mr. Lenarčič used really the right qualification of it was premature and risky, but that is also what politics does. And I have seen, as my colleague said, from United States to many other countries, politicians behave like this, take sometimes risk.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions, if we can do this here. So, no? Anyone? Well, all right then. All that's left to do then is, I guess, thank you once again for joining us this afternoon for what I hope was a very interesting press conference for you, and to wish you a wonderful rest of the day.